If you've ever caught yourself repeating the same clicks in Excel day after day, formatting, sorting columns, moving things around, stop. There's a faster way. With just one click, a macro can do the job for you. And with a little VBA, you can take it even further, building your own smart automations that adapt to your workflow. In this video, I'll show you how to record your first macro, peek under the hood with VBA, and write your first lines of code. No programming background required. We'll kick things off with something super simple, recording a macro to automate a task that you might do often. And don't worry, you don't have to write any code yet. Excel can actually write it for you. You just need to know where to look. If you've never used macros before, you might not see the Developer tab on your ribbon because it's hidden by default. Let's fix that first. Right-click anywhere in the ribbon and then customize the ribbon. You'll see a list of tabs on the right and make sure Developer is checked. Click OK, and now you'll see the Developer tab in the ribbon, which is where all the macro tools live. We're going to record a macro that transforms this table to this nicely formatted table with the column order rearranged and the data sorted and the sales column with comma separators. So to start recording your macro, click Record Macro on the Developer tab. You need to give your macro a name. I'm going to call it Format Data. Now, a quick tip, macro names must start with a letter. They can't contain any spaces, and they can only include letters, numbers, or underscores. We've also got an option to assign a shortcut key. I'll leave that blank for now. And you need to make sure that you store this macro in your personal macro workbook. That way it will be available to use in any workbook you have open. Click OK. And now Excel is recording every action I make. By the way, we can see it's in record mode on the Developer tab. We've got Stop Recording now. And in the bottom left of the status bar, we've also got the Stop button. Let's say each day we receive a file containing our sales by product. As you see here, we want to remove these bold headings. So on the Home tab, I'm going to clear Formats. And instead, I'm going to give it a blue background and the font in white and bold. I want to format the sales column with comma separated numbers, and I want to move the category to the first column. Then I'm going to select the data, and on the Data tab I want to sort it, and I'm going to sort it by category, then by product. We want it sorted A to Z. Click OK. I'll click the Stop Recording button in the bottom left, and that's it. It's only a few steps, but imagine doing this across 50 files a week. With this macro, I can reduce 20 or so clicks per file down to 1 because Excel remembers every step. Now I've got another copy of the data here. Let's see the macro in action. To run it, go to the Developer tab, click on Macros, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt F8. Find the macro in the list, there it is there, the first one, and click Run. And in the blink of an eye, Excel applies all those formatting steps instantly. Just one click and everything's done. That's the power of macros, automating the boring stuff. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because behind every macro, Excel's quietly writing the VBA code for you. To see it, again on the Developer tab, click on Visual Basic. This opens a new window, which is the Visual Basic Editor. I'll call it VB Editor for short, and you can think of it as under the hood of Excel. On the left, we've got a list of files I currently have open. Remember, I saved my macro in my personal macro workbook. And this is a workbook that automatically opens in the background every time you open Excel. You'll find the macro in the modules. Just double click it and it will open up the module on the right hand side. We can see it here. And in this pane, we can modify the code if required. Now you don't need to understand every word, not yet, but this is the real value. Once you learn a few basics, you can tweak, edit, and build powerful automations. Now that you've seen how Excel records your actions with a macro, let's take it a step further and write our own VBA code in a module using a procedure. Now a procedure is just a named block of code that performs a task. You can think of it like a recipe. You write it once, and then you can run it anytime without retyping anything. And there are 3 types of procedures in VBA. Sub-procedures. These perform actions like formatting cells or inserting rows. Function procedures, which return a result like a formula. and property procedures. And these are more advanced and usually used with custom objects. So Control N to open a new workbook. Again, on the Developer tab, I'm going to go into the Visual Basic Editor. Now another way to open it is with the keyboard shortcut Alt F11. Need to locate the workbook in the project pane. It's Workbook 2. And then right click, Insert, Module. Now we've got a module and it's open up the coding pane on the right. I'm going to insert a procedure, and in here I need to give it a name. We'll call it Format Header. The type will be sub. For now we're keeping it simple and use sub procedures, which are the building blocks of Excel automation. The scope can be public, and public just means we can run this macro from anywhere in the workbook. It's not hidden away. Click OK, and Excel automatically inserts the opening and closing sub, and the name, which we'll use to refer to the macro later. Of course, once you're confident with VBA, you can type this information directly in this window, and Excel will insert the end sub for you. Before we start typing inside the procedure, there's something important to understand. When you're working with VBA, most of the time you'll follow the pattern Object, Property, Value. In plain English, you pick the thing in Excel you want to work with, that's the object. You choose what you want to know or change about it, that's the property. Then you assign it a new value. Let's take a simple example. Let's add some rows to give ourselves some space. Let's say we want to make the text in cells A1 to B1 bold. In VBA, the object are the cells, and we refer to them with range. And then in double quotes, we put this cell reference. So we want A1 to B1, close double quotes, close parentheses on range. Then we add a dot to access the property of that object. I want to format the font. So to just start typing it in, and the IntelliSense will bring up the list. Tab to insert font. Now we want to make it bold. So we go even further with another dot, and there's bold there, arrow down, tab to insert it. And I want that to equal true. That's going to set cells A1 to B1 in a bold font. And that's one complete line of code inside our sub procedure. Let's add another one. I'm going to copy the range reference again, and this time we're going to set the fill color, and that's done with the interior.color, and I want it to equal RGB. So red is going to be 200, green is going to be 200, and blue is going to be 255. This is just going to fill it with a light purple color, and that's it. Let's test it out. I'll click the play button. Let's go back to Excel, and you can see it's filled in the cells with the purple fill color. Let's test the font is bold in both cells. Perfect. And that's it. This tiny block of code, just 4 lines, now performs a repeatable action. Anytime you run this macro, Excel will format cells A1 to B1 of the current sheet the way you want. And that's your first real step toward learning VBA. You might be wondering, why learn VBA at all? Can't I just record a macro or ask ChatGPT to write one for me? Sure, recorded macros are great for simple, repetitive tasks, but they can't make decisions, adapt to different inputs, or interact with users. And while ChatGPT can help write code, it doesn't know your specific workbook, sheet names, or logic, unless you guide it very carefully. That's why learning the VBA basics gives you real control. One of the first building blocks to understand is a variable. It's a kind of labeled storage box you can name and then put something into, like a number or date, or even inputs from users, and reuse it later in your code. For example, let's say we want Excel to automatically generate the next invoice number. While it only saves a little bit of time, more importantly, it reduces errors. No more manual typing the wrong number or skipping one. In our case, we're going to store the current invoice number from cell G9 in a variable, then add 1 to it, and then write the new value back, all using just a few lines of VBA. Now just note this file is called Automated Invoice Video. I'm going to Alt F11 to open the VB editor, and then with the Windows key I'm going to right arrow just to dock it on the right, and we'll have the invoice on the left. Let's just bring this over a bit closer. Here's my file, and I want to right click and insert a module. And this opens the pane where I can insert my VBA. I'm just going to close these 2 panes to bring it over closer to the invoice. And I'm going to paste in the code I wrote earlier, and then we'll step through it. Starting with dim current invoice as long. This declares a variable to hold the current invoice number. Long is the data type in VBA, and it's short for long integer, or very large whole number. And next invoice is a variable to store the next invoice number. The next line of code in green is prefixed with an apostrophe, and this apostrophe tells Excel that this is a comment and it should be ignored. It's a good idea to comment your code so it's easy to follow. We can see here I defined the current invoice variable and used .value to read the contents of cell G9, which is the cell containing the invoice number. Then I defined the next invoice variable to be the current invoice value plus 1. And lastly, I write the new invoice number back to cell G9's value. So I'll save that macro, and if we go back to the Excel file, just note that it's a .xlsm file type, which is essential if you want to store the macros in the current file, as opposed to your personal macro workbook, and I'll cover more on saving your macros later. So now that my macro is written, I can assign it to a button in the worksheet just to make it easy to access for anyone who uses the template. I'll insert a shape. I like this rectangle with rounded corners, and I'll just left click and draw it in, and we'll call this new invoice number. Let's just resize it slightly, and then I can right click the shape, down at the bottom, assign macro. Find the macro in the list, it's this one here, generate next invoice number, and click OK. Now all I need to do is click the button, keep an eye on the invoice number, to have a new invoice number inserted. Job done. Now this is a small example, but it shows why variables and VBA in general can save you time and reduce errors, helping you build better spreadsheets. Okay, let's say you've saved or printed your invoice. It'd be nice if Excel could reset the form for the next one. So in this example, we're going to loop through the invoice table and delete all the rows except for the first one, keeping the formats and formulas intact. This is a great example of how VBA loops can handle repetitive cleanup tasks that would be tedious to do manually. I'll Alt F11 to go back to the VB editor, and let's dock it on the right with the invoice on the left. And then after the end sub, just to insert a few carriage returns, and I'm going to paste in my next set of code, and I'll step through it. So this is the reset invoice table code. I've defined two variables, row index as a number and the table as a list object. We assign our table, which is called invoice items, to a variable called table. If I just go back to the worksheet, go to the table design tab, you can see the name of the table is invoice items. Then we use what's called a for loop to go from the last row to the second, starting at the bottom of the table. Table.listrows.count gives the total number of rows currently in the table, not the Excel sheet, just the table. The loop starts at the last row and counts upwards to row 2. So it'll loop through rows 4, 3 and 2. It doesn't delete row 1. This is on purpose, so the table keeps at least one blank row to store the formula, formatting, and be ready for the user to start entering the next invoice item without losing the table structure. Step -1 means we're counting backwards. This is important because if we deleted from top to bottom, we'd risk skipping rows due to the shifting row numbers. We delete each row using table.listRows, referencing the variable rowIndex.delete. Next, rowIndex tells Excel to move to the previous row and repeat. And the last line refers to the entire remaining row in the table as a range. So if you can imagine, we'll have one row left, but it still has data in it. So we want to resize it to one row by 5 columns. This just limits the selection to those first 5 columns so it doesn't delete anything in the price column, which contains our formula. And then clear contents removes the cell values only, keeping the formatting intact. All right, let's test it out. We'll save it and I'll press play. Keep your eye on the table. And just like that, it's reset, ready to use again. By the way, if you're interested in using this automated invoice template, I built it in a separate video, and in the VBA code there, I reset the invoice number and cleared the customer billing details and emptied the table in one macro. You can see it here in action. I'll clear the invoice and it gives me a message, says the template's reset, new invoice is 1011. So you can check that video out here if you're interested in using this template. So far, everything the macros have done is one way. We told Excel what to do, and it did it. No questions asked. But what if you want to show a message to the user, or ask for input before running something, or let the user decide what to do next? That's where the MsgBox and InputBox come in. They're two of the simplest but most useful tools in VBA. Let's say you want to confirm something before continuing. For example, let's go back to the VB editor, and in Book 1, I'll right-click and insert a module. One option we have is to ask yes/no questions. So just paste in the code and step through it. This code, called confirm action, displays a confirmation message box, and it asks, do you want to format the cells? And it gives the user yes and no buttons. If the user clicks yes, then it's going to format cells A1 to B1 in bold font and set a fill color in light purple. And then it will show another message box to say the formatting's complete. Now, if the user clicks no, then the message box will show a message action cancelled. Now notice this code uses if, then, else statements. And these are just like the if function in Excel, except with VBA, we can not only return a value to a cell, we can also perform actions like the cell formatting here, but also show a message, send an email, delete rows, anything. And that's something Excel formulas simply can't do. So let's go back to Excel and we'll just test the code. Remember, on the Developer tab, open the macros. Our macro is called confirm action. Let's run it. We get the message box. Do you want to format the cells? Yes. It formats the cells, and we get another message box to say formatting's complete. I think you'll agree it's a nice user experience, especially if you're building solutions for less experienced users. Now, when recording macros and writing VBA, it's imperative that you use the correct file type. Otherwise, you could lose all your hard work. If you choose to store your macro in your personal macro workbook, then when you close Excel, it will ask you to save that file. And you should click Save here so that it's available next time you start Excel. However, if you've written your macro or any VBA code and stored it in a module in any other workbook, and then you save the file as a regular .xlsx file type, Excel will wipe out all your macros. Instead, when you save your workbook, File, Save As, make sure you choose Excel Macro Enable Workbook from the drop-down here. It's a .xlsm file type, and that little M at the end stands for macros, and it tells Excel to keep all the VBA code you've written in the file. There's no doubt VBA and macros are powerful, and it's easy to get carried away automating everything in sight. However, I often see people writing VBA to do things that are already built into Excel, and the built-in tools are typically way more efficient than anything you could write in VBA. So before you go too far down the VBA rabbit hole, check out this video on using Power Query to automate the gathering and cleaning of data. It's something we spend up to 80% of our time doing, and with Power Query, it's super easy to automate. I'll see you there.